world breaker. I need to explain that. So in comic books, the character, depending on who the comic book character is oftentimes dependent upon who writes it. I mean, yes, the general characteristics of the character remains regardless of the author, but for the most part, how the character acts, the strengths of the character, the weaknesses of the character, many of those things are determined by the person who's writing it and the story that that person wants to craft. In Worldbreaker Hawk, they sent off Hawk to another planet. Now, Hawk develops a family and everything else, but the device that they send him on eventually blows up, killing his wife and a large swath of those people that he was ruling. Hawk gets the ability to come back to Earth, and he is unrestrained in his anger and rage. And as Hawk gets madder, his strength level skyrockets. Supposedly, there's no end to Incredible Hulk's strength. It just depends on how angry he gets. Well, in this case, this is Hawk at his most angriest, at his most unrestrained, and Hawk goes from pillar to post, finding everyone that was instrumental in that decision, essentially the top people in Marvel, and beating the shit out of them. And he does this to the X-Men, Fantastic Four, any particular person that you think you might be aware of in comic books, especially the main characters. Hawk crushed in one of these events where he is literally beating the shit out of one character after the next. He stomps on the ground and cracks the earth. Now, this is where the term Worldbreaker comes in. I am using this to refer to Sanders because this is Sanders at his most unrestrained. Donald Trump made a poor decision in deciding to come after Sanders. Sanders makes it very clear, I am the one that knocks. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, so we like to say even $1 helps. Before I start, there's 2 super chats that I missed in the last video that I want to answer. Jay Wood, yo, did you see the big sexist accusations the Warren campaign just threw at Sanders? Yes, I did. I have another video coming up after this video on that very specific point. It's littering my Twitter feed in regards to videos and everything else associated with it. So yes, I am going to mention that because everybody, CNN included, has jumped on that nonsense whole hog. It only took a slight investigation to come up with the reality behind it. But again, a lie gets across the world before truth puts on his boots. Mark Twain. Extreme Chukka, indica or sativa? Sativa. Always sativa. I don't want to be stuck in a couch. I kind of want to have my brain going all over the place. And sativa kind of just works in tandem with that process. All right, let's get to this one. So this is Trump coming after Sanders. Now, I've made this point before. You are defined by your enemies. Meaning, politically speaking, and honestly, I think everything's politics. I think all of this stuff for the most part applies across the board. You don't elevate your enemies. Meaning you don't elevate enemies that don't matter. People who have criticisms, people who dislike you, people who hate you, there's always going to be a probability of people that dislike you. That's just kind of life. You're never going to get everybody to like you or join on board. Ultimately, you're trying to get a coalition. Same sense is true when you're talking about this kind of political speech of there are going to be people in a minority that dislike you. In your role as either president or whatever capacity you're in, it is not in your best interest to elevate those voices that are in the minority that dislike you. Threats that don't matter get ignored. If my opponent is doing something on the queen side when I'm trying to take his head off on the king side, if those threats don't matter, then it doesn't behoove me to do anything to respond to the fact that he's doing something that I think doesn't matter. Now, if it does matter, then I may need to respond. And the question becomes, how do I respond? If you're the president of the United States, there are going to be millions of people that dislike you, millions of people that hate you, and including when you're running in the primary, you have 20 other people in that race. It doesn't behoove you to elevate somebody in that race that doesn't matter. Why would you elevate? Why would you give prominence? Why would you allow the media to discuss the fact that you're talking about something that's attacking you and your interests? You just don't do it. When it matters, that's when you deal with it. Now, the catch here is the fact that Sanders, or the fact that Trump is attacking Sanders, gets across this thing that he matters. He understands that this is the person that's raising the most money. This guy has crowds larger than my own. This guy is surging in the polls within a few weeks of the first few polling. He's a threat. And not just a threat, it is very possible that he ends up winning that primary. The catch here is, though, that Donald Trump attacking Sanders in this way isolates Sanders and Trump in regards to the public narrative or the public conversation, making it look as if this is the guy to beat. Trump, by attacking Sanders, elevates him that much higher in the context of the primary. He shouldn't have done this. Sanders is the worst person in the world for Trump to isolate himself with. And I still make the case that I know people think that Sanders is a risky prospect, but if they look back over John Kerry, Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, all of them are, for the most part, just Joe Biden. All of them lost. All of them were considered by the establishment, this is the person who you need to choose because this person has the best chance. All of them were wrong. My point is, Donald Trump right now is your president. You thought it was impossible for Donald Trump to win that race. Donald Trump is your president. If you're looking for somebody to try to beat Trump, maybe you need to have your own populist candidate. After all, you got beat by a blue-collar billionaire, the Democratic Party. Populism, from the standpoint of somebody like a Sanders, is surging. I mean, you can look at the public polling on this stuff in regards to his policy platforms. He is more in line with what the public wants, not somebody like a Joe Biden. They think he's risky because for the last 40, 50 years, the only thing they've had were the John Kerrys, the Al Gore, the Hillary Clintons, the Barack Obamas. But that's only a factor of familiarity. The catch here is your familiar choices lost. Your familiar choices lost. Challenge your assumptions. This is Trump.
Bernie Sanders, crazy Bernie, has condemned the U.S. military strike on Soleimani, the world's top terrorist. Think of it, the world's top terrorist. And we're having people like Nancy Pelosi.
Now, Pelosi is greatly unpopular. She's just unpopular. Tying Pelosi and Sanders is, again, this is all politics. He's putting on a show here, but this show has very specific objectives and what he wants to accomplish in the show. I keep making this point. Debates, speeches, rallies, all of these things. Yes, there's an overarching thing that's taking place, meaning the candidate is on the debate stage and everything else, but they have very specific objectives that they need to accomplish in those platforms. And I kept saying that whatever Sanders needs to do in the context of the debate, yes, he needs to win the debate, but he also needs to pry away support from Biden. Not in this just overt, I won the debate, but in very specific areas, because Joe Biden losing a debate doesn't lose some support among groups that think he's more electable. Joe Biden being hit on various issues of Social Security or on the black vote does, especially if it peels away a few percentage points. Trump goes after Sanders. Sanders relishes this. And by the way, it's not just the speeches. Trump also puts out this. Dangerous Bernie can't be trusted to defend American lives. Bernie Sanders is wealthy, fossil fuel guzzling millionaire. This is a swift boating of Sanders on his main key element, this notion that he's authentic and that he's fighting for the working class. Good luck with that. But I suppose this is the same thing of hitting him in his mask. But I don't think this works. He has 40, 50 years behind him to back this up. And you're a blue-collar billionaire that had 4 years in office as president that was full of all sorts of corruption stuff, not to mention when you did get the opportunity to act legislatively, you gave tax cuts to your billionaire colleagues, not to mention yourself. And instead of getting us out of wars, you got us more invested in those wars. Personally, I relish this fight. You have no idea I relish this fight. But so does Sanders. Sanders, in the Democratic primary, is a restrained animal. I mean, ultimately, he can make his peace and everything else, but he's restrained. Ultimately, he's still within the context of a Democratic Party, and he can only hit candidates so hard within that Democratic Party before, everybody cries foul. But not with Trump. Not with Trump. In many elements, the people in the Sanders camp want him to be more aggressive when going after the various elements in the Democratic Party, but he doesn't do it. Again, he's under the auspices of the party. He's running in that party. He's running prior, independent, going into the party, meaning he's somewhat untrusted. And even beyond the untrusted thing, they cheated him in 2016. It's clear on their perspective of him. So he's a restrained beast. None of that exists with Trump. Corrupt, liar, failure. These language and these words that he is okay with using when he's going after Trump is something that he would never do to another Democrat. Sanders going after Trump is entirely and completely unrestrained.
We have the president who is a fraud, because during his campaign he told working people one thing and he ended up doing something else. I believe, and I will personally be doing this in the coming weeks and months, is making the case that we have a president who has sold out the working families of this country, who wants to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid after he promised he would not do that, and who has documentedly lied thousands of times since he is president. We have a president
will be made day after day after day across the country. He has failed. He has lied. He is corrupt. And I understand Trump, is going to say this guy's a socialist and everything else, or he's going to call him crazy. Sanders responded to the crazy Bernie thing saying, yeah, you're going to lose. This is a fight that they are eager to have. This is a fight that they want to have. This is Sanders on the campaign stage responding to the crazy Bernie stuff. And by the way, crazy Bernie is somewhat desperate. I don't think it works. The guy has been in politics for 40 years. And he's been either a mayor, he's been senator, he's been in the House of Representatives. He's been with this particular policy platform for the past 40 years. The policies that he's talking about and pushing forth are dramatically popular. Meaning, if you're going to call the guy crazy, you need to somehow quantify that. And you could say that, but the moment that you get on a debate stage or the moment this argument is being pursued in media and everything else, it doesn't work. Hillary Clinton was corrupt, so calling her corrupt to some degree worked. Joe Biden is sleepy and out of it and does have mental fits or mental issues. So that, to some degree, works. You can call him Sleepy Biden. That's more funny than anything else. The crazy thing is a little weird and is a sign of desperation. Sanders responds to Trump. Unrestrained.
May have noticed that recently our campaign and me personally have been the target of attacks from Trump and the Republican Party, because they are catching on that our campaign is the campaign that can and will defeat them. So expect to hear a whole lot of lies and distortions coming from Trump, his campaign, and the Republican Party. Because they know what we know, is that we are going to expose the fact that when Trump talks about being a friend of working people, he is a liar and a fraud. You are not a friend of working people when you attempt to throw 32 million people off the health care they currently have. That's not a friend of working people. You are not a friend of working people when you tell the American people during your campaign here in Iowa that your tax plan would be designed to protect working families, but the plan you pass gives 83% of the benefits over a 10-year period to the top 1%. That's not being a friend of workers. You are not a friend of workers when you come to Iowa during your campaign and you say, we are not going to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, but then you bring forth a budget that calls for massive cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and cuts to the Social Security Disability Fund. When you do that, you are not a friend of workers. You are a liar, and we are going to expose that during the general election.
That is a strong argument because that argument just so happens to be true. I don't think I've ever heard Sanders call anybody a liar outright in the way that he's been able to use that term and wield that term as a weapon against Trump, because that term just so happens to be true. And I have to be honest, the argument works. The argument just works. The public went out and chose somebody who they say 60% of the public didn't believe the guy was adequately prepared to do the job, meaning they thought he was not right for the job, despite the fact that they chose him for the job. That gets across a massive defect in the other candidate. That defect, to some degree, being an establishment candidate. She was the establishment choice. She was the most status quo candidate that you could have ever chosen, and she effectively lost. They put up a dumber version of her to run in this primary that just so happens to be a man, Joe Biden, with mental issues, who has been getting wailed upon in debate stage after debate stage. But again, Joe Biden's main thing is electability. What Trump and what some of these other people are starting to notice and realize is, oh my God, we thought it was Biden. It is indeed seeming like it's going to be potentially Sanders. He has the biggest crowds. He has the most money. He has the strongest base of support that is that much more enthusiastic. And if you're talking about trying to win an election, winning an election is not about electability, believe it or not. Meaning, electability is somewhat of a false god. Saying that this person is more electable is just your perspective of the world. It's just what you take the world to be. It's somewhat different, especially when you get into the context of an election and the environment that you find yourself in, going at state to state to state to state. Electability, to some degree, should be tethered to something. Meaning this person is more electable because their policies are better. This person is more electable because of something. But in this case, electability is just a thing unto itself. It's a balloon that's just tethered to nothing, just floats around. I'm making the point that if you want to win in the race, finding somebody who's more electable has more to do with, will the public vote for him? Will the public back him? Will they go out and stomp for him? Will they cut their chests open in order to make that last vote, in order to put him in office? Electability is more than just thinking the person is more electable. That's kind of what I'm getting at. You have to get the fundamentals. In this case, massive amount of support, a massive policy proposal that materially benefits the overwhelming majority of the population. Meaning, even if a lot of people don't necessarily get it, a lot of people do. And those people that do are animated by it. I'm making the point that electability has to have more to it than just you thinking it's electable. Sanders, in this case, people think he's risky. But the catch is the policy proposals, the material things that he brings to this race, the energy that he brings to this race, all of those things are going to be entirely crucial in winning. If you have a typical election year when you have a president in office, Democrats lose. They may win the vote, but not having an energy, not having a motivation about it. I was reading some of the polling on this stuff by organizations. Yes, they may win the popular vote, but that's not how we choose our president. They will lose the Electoral College. Sanders, his pathway is to bring in that 50% of the population that just doesn't vote. You get 5% of those people, that's a landslide. I'm making a point to you that between the two, Trump knows. Listen to this. This is Obama's 2012 campaign manager. If I were a campaign manager for Donald Trump and I look at the field, I would very much want to run against Bernie Sanders. Now, Messina here, Jim Messina, doesn't necessarily have a great track record with this. I mean, after all, Messina was the guy that put in this. Proof there is a God. I prayed every night for a year that Trump would win the Republican primary. She exists, and she made him win. Thank God. Hashtag Trump. Why is he saying that? Because if you look back at WikiLeaks, they believe that the only person that Hillary Clinton had a chance of beating was Donald Trump. So he was happy as a lark that Trump won, because in his head, Trump is the patsy that we can beat. This was also the guy that thought it was a good idea to push for Brexit because they didn't think that Brexit would pass. Messina does not have a good track record in making these sorts of predictions. So if he's betting on Trump wanting Sanders in, that Trump should take that much more of of a heads up from Messina and be worried about that. I'll leave it here. I have another video that I want to do before I leave. Let's see. There was a super chat. James O'Keefe's coming video to smear Bernie Sanders. I saw that. James O'Keefe is a liar. I don't necessarily think he has a good track record or pedigree that people are necessarily going to believe. The issue becomes outfits like CNN and MSNBC that is willing to essentially take whatever comes up against Sanders and run with it with their network, whether it's true or not. Like this nonsense about Elizabeth Warren and talking about Sanders is attacking Elizabeth Warren. It's utter nonsense. His supporters have wanted him to go after her for months. This is kind of like the Assad thing, right? Assad gasses his own people. And you say, well, wait a minute, why would Assad release the chemical weapons when he's got 90% of his population back? That just seems weird to do. And they say, well, he's a bad guy, so you should just trust us. And you find out, yeah, it was nonsense. Same thing here. With Warren falling in the polls, I can show you she's a falling rock. With her falling to irrelevance in the polls. Right here, look at this. This is Warren. This is Warren's line. Oh, bam, tanks, craters, 14%. Falling rock. And go to Real Clear Politics. Same thing. A falling rock. A falling stone. Now, why on earth? Here she is. Bloop. Bloop. That's the sound a rock hits when it hits the ground. Bloop. Bloop. So why on earth would he change his perspective or his tenor towards Warren when there is no political reason for him to do so? He has what he wants. Her people have fleeing her, going to either Buttigieg or him. She has utterly collapsed in the polling. But now they say, despite the fact that she's utterly collapsed to almost irrelevance, that he's now attacking her. It doesn't make logical sense because it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I'll do a video on it, but it's nonsense. Like, share, subscribe. And by the way, this does Warren no favors. This is desperate. The people who back Sanders are going to hate her for this. They're going to hate her guts for this. Like, share, subscribe. I'll be right back. Thanks all.